people who believe in the paranormal will want answers and will be more likely to jump to conclusions. So if you don't like uncertainty, you want control. The paranormal gives you a nice framework in which to interpret and understand the world.
The very, very first experience was about 5 or 6. And I know that roughly because of the house that we're living in at the time. So, and that was a feeling of, I woke up in the night because it felt like somebody had sat on the bed, or like a cat or an animal had crawled onto the bed and was right next to my legs. Not sat on my legs, but just kind of leaning against them. And we didn't have any animals at the time. We didn't have cat or dog, so that wasn't the explanation for it. And I remember sitting up in my bed and kind of put my hands in the duvet and looking around as though I was expecting to find a cat or an animal, and there was no explanation for it.
My name's Neil Dagnall. I'm a reader at Manchester Metropolitan University, where my areas of interest are applied psychology and particularly belief in the paranormal. We've had a paranormal course at MMU since the late 90s, and I was unit leader for that for several years. And recently it's merged, well, it's gone from being about parapsychology, wholly about parapsychology, to moving to anomalous psychology. Anomalous psychology looks at psychological explanations for apparent, alleged parapsychological phenomena, so that's quite interesting. That's quite a complex question, so I'll break it down slightly. When we're talking about the paranormal is quite a broad area of study. So if you look at the typical measures of paranormal belief, they encompass things like extrasensory perception, which involves being able to pick up mental messages from other people. It involves being able to tap into their thoughts, to things like psychokinesis, which involves the ability to move objects with the mind, and hauntings and ghosts. Now, some of those subjects are less polarising than others. So, for example, if I start talking about demonic possession, one of the reasons why people will not have a lot of, will not give that any credibility is because it's quite an extreme view. Whereas there is some scientific evidence to support ideas around ESP, telepathy, remote viewing. There's been government projects in the United States, for example, in the 1970s. So one of the reasons why it's polarising is because very often with some of the more extreme views, there's social stigma attached to them. So if people are talking about things that other people don't feel comfortable with or they don't believe in, that's likely to make them feel uneasy and not want to disclose those matters.
I'm Nicola Perkins, and I live in a house where there is a spirit. We've lived with this spirit for quite a while. He's actually a valued member of the family, we class him as now, and we've had plenty of experiences with him. He's from the 1950s. He hung himself from our loft hatch. He had mental health issues, bless him, and he'd just had a fight on the front with the family's opposite son, which led him on to do what he did. I feel him a lot in the summertime when I'm in the garden doing things. I can tell that he's around me. So I've actually got a night vision camera on my garden, and I'll come in and turn it on at the night time. And I'll say, if you're there, then show me. And he has. He's actually showed himself quite a few times on the camera. So we're quite lucky, actually. I'd say he's an intelligent spirit because he can interact with us. There's one particular day when my two sons were fighting really bad, toy fighting. They wouldn't stop and they weren't listening to me. So my neighbour said, she said, well, get my Amy, because Amy's a big girl and she's strong. She said, and I'll get her to wrestle you both to the floor and that'll make you stop. So anyway, Amy come up and she got my son in an headlock outside, and they were mucking about on the grass. And I'm not joking, there must have been about 12 people in this house all together. And all of a sudden, because Amy had hold of my son, everything came flying off the shelves in the hall. There was banging above us from every room. There was banging from 2 rooms at the same time, and what have you. And then Linda actually said, Amy, get off him, he doesn't like it. Dominic don't like it, get off him, leave him. God, he is protective, isn't he? And the banging carried on for about 5 minutes, and she'd got off him and what have you, but we was like, yeah, he's very protective over Morgan, let's leave him now, let's just let them get on with whatever they do themselves.
What the question's on about is the idea that experiences could be related to delusional type states or other normal things that happen to people. One of the reasons that's often given for things like alien abduction and hauntings is sleep paralysis, and the idea that when people are shifting in and out of consciousness, that they will have these unusual experiences. For example, night terrors where they imagine demons sat on their chest. And the reason for this is that it's a manifestation of the confusion between consciousness and sleep paralysis. Another reason why people often mistake extrasensory perceptions is not because they're necessarily delusional, but because they misunderstand probability. I've done quite a few studies where we've given people probabilistic reasoning tasks. One of them is perception of randomness. So do they understand that this event could happen by accident, coincidentally, or do they wrongly infer causation? And very often with people who believe in the paranormal, what they tend to do is they jump to conclusions, they misrepresent randomness, and also they have a looser cognitive style, which means that they have more unusual cognitive and perceptual experiences. And in trying to understand them, if they believe in the paranormal actually gives them a framework in which to interpret them.
And then when I was 19, I absolutely saw a man, a ghost, outside through French doors into the garden. And he, I didn't know who he was. Definitely somebody from the past, because he looked like he just walked straight out the 1920s with a kind of trilby hat and a long trench coat and quite kind-looking eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't really move. He was just there, just kind of staring. I was terrified. When I ran out of the house, tried to get the keys to take with me to lock the door behind me. I couldn't find the keys because I was in such a flap and such a panic and so terrified, and ran out of the house. I didn't even look back at the French doors to see whether he was still there or not. They were locked. But yeah, I just felt instantly cold.
Again, there's a number of reasons for this. One reason very often that people has been associated with belief in the paranormal is the social, the idea that they're on the edges of society. So they represent marginal groups within society, and because they are located within marginal groups, they lack control. And what paranormal belief does is it gives them control over the external environment. So that's one set of ideas. So you'll find that locus of control is important with regards to things like superstition. So if you have a financial crash and society is out of control, paranormal beliefs and superstition will increase because they give people control over the world. If they're believers, they then fit in with their worldview, so they reduce their anxiety. Because another variable that's very important with regards to paranormal belief is the fact that believers don't like ambiguity. They like very clear-cut answers. And again, that fits in with what I said earlier about perception of randomness. The fact that people who believe in the paranormal will want answers and will be more likely to jump to conclusions. So if you don't like uncertainty, you want control. The paranormal gives you a nice framework in which to interpret and understand the world.
Well, as a child, I used to always hear these voices talking, and it sounded like two old men to me in a pub. It sounded like a pub background light noise, and I could always hear this. And then I remember as a child, I used to always sleep under the covers and what have you, because I just could sense something in this bedroom that wasn't good, and I was really afraid of it. And then I remember actually seeing a tall man with a trilby hat, and he used to stand by my bedroom door. And I told my mum about it, and she was like, "What? He's got a trilby hat? Well, that's something you didn't even know what a trilby hat was, Nicola, so I knew that whatever you was going on about was real." And she'd asked me about him and what have you. Yeah, so I remember being petrified of this man that used to stand near my door with this trilby hat.
We started the group up 2 years ago, Manchester Paranormal team, literally just because of a belief in the fact that, you know, it was something I enjoyed doing, and I'm totally in belief that there is things out there, whether it's something to do with your imagination or your well-being or anything, but there is another alternative world out there.
Another reason why people believe in the paranormal is it gives life meaning as well. That's another essential factor. Similar to some aspects of religion, not only does it explain the world, but it gives you a reason to justify your existence. In the case of people who have near-death experiences very often, after they've had a near-death experience, it gives them a life-affirming reason for carrying on. They're much more positive after the near-death experience. And that again is part of the fact that the paranormal gives them assurances, because they know that there's, or they think that they know, there's something after this world for them to continue on in.
I'm a total skeptic. I don't believe anything like that. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in the afterlife or anything like that. But there's one experience I've had that sort of made me, it was unexplainable. I couldn't explain it. And I was taking some furniture from, a piece of furniture from downstairs up into the bedroom upstairs. And my brother was helping me. And we could not get it into the bedroom at the top of the stairs. And I was cursing and whatever. And then just out the corner of my eye, from out of nowhere, I saw somebody with dark hair walking down the stairs. You could see the top of their head. And at the same time, my brother saw a shadow walking down the stairs. And I couldn't explain it. I couldn't figure out where it had come from. It wasn't anyone else in the house. There was no footsteps, no noise or nothing. And I've just never understood how that happened.
Why else do people believe in the paranormal? It's interesting. It comes from a series of New Age beliefs. If you look at many of the beliefs that have emerged in the last few years, alternative therapies, for example, new religions, all those aspects about a distrust of science and technology. So as technology becomes more pervasive, then one way of reacting against technology is to believe in things that can't necessarily be explained by science or can't be captured by technology. So again, that gives people a basis for believing in the paranormal.
That's the way I look at it. If you go, some people go into a haunted house and they believe something, they're going to see something, so the mind plays tricks and it tells them they're going to see something. So any slightest little thing, they'll think it's that, instead of actually looking into it and trying to explain it. But,
The house that I'm living in, I've been there 12 years. And probably on maybe 4 or 5 occasions, In pure daylight as well, there's been a man stood at either the end of my drive or directly across the road from my house. And an old man who's got a black Scotty dog. And my son saw him once as well. My son's not a young child, he's in his teens. And we had a conversation once about who is this man who just stands at the end of the drive staring at the house. And there was one morning that I was either going out to bring the bins back in or to take them out. And I saw him standing opposite across the road. And there wasn't anybody else around. I think it was quite early in the morning. And he was just stood there with his Scotty dog, and I kind of walked to the end of my drive and looked across the road and said, "Are you okay? Can I help you? Yeah, I've noticed you here a few times." And he said to me that he'd been born in my house, and pointed to my bedroom window and said, in that room, he said, my mother had 6 children, 6 of us were all born there. So I walked across the road and had a bit of a chat with him about how he grew up in the local area and all the rest of it. And he had given me his first name. A short while after that, I mentioned to a friend of mine who grew up just a few roads over around the corner from where my house is, and said, because he knew everybody in the area, so I said, "Oh, do you know this chap called, we'll call him Mr. Jones, got a black Scotty dog and he lives on such and such road?" And he said, "You mean, did I know him?" And I said, "No, do you?" He said, "Well, if it's the same guy we're talking about, a black, silky, Scotty dog, he died years ago." I just kind of went cold.
Can it be explained, the main core of parapsychology, so if we take it as being PSI, ESP and PK, no, even within that narrow domain there's considerable debate about whether phenomena exists or not. If we take ESP on its own, which is probably one of the most credible bodies of evidence, people will accept that there's evidence. So if we look at the number of trials that people try to guess what the card's going to be, or send messages to people located in different locations, people's performance is often above chance. But then there's a whole debate about whether that's occurred due to flaws in the methodology, whether there's been problems in terms of sensory leakage, whether people have cheated. So parapsychology is particularly rigorous, and because it's rigorous and because it draws on its own history, which means there's many cases of confounded experiments, many cases of cheating, it's very, very difficult to establish anything as being genuinely parapsychological. So even in the areas of ESP, many people who are parapsychologists don't believe ESP exists. They explain it in terms of methodological flaws, in terms of statistical anomalies, with reference to a whole range of conventional and mundane explanations. Similarly, if we go a bit more speculatively into the areas of haunting, there's psychologists. They are psychologists. There's psychologists like Richard Wiseman and Chris French, who talk about parapsychological phenomena and do it from a psychological perspective, and they start from the idea that these things don't exist. And because they don't exist, what they'll do is they'll find psychological explanations for why these things happen. And regardless of whether they're particularly applicable or not, if something happens, so for example, if we see an object move on the table there and we don't know why it happened, they will put forward a series of psychological explanations, no matter how good they are. And they'll say, well, it might not be that, but it could be this. So from that range of explanations, one of these must be true. What's definitely true is it isn't paranormal.